What if everything the world thought it knew about Meghan Markle's motherhood was a carefully crafted illusion? No, this isn't another tabloid smear or wild internet theory. This is different. This is what's now echoing through Buckingham Palace walls, what insiders are whispering behind thick oak doors, and what royal watchers never imagined they'd hear. Meghan Markle is not the biological mother of Prince Archie. That statement alone has sent shockwaves across the globe, but what happened just 3 minutes ago was the tipping point. Meghan, camera-dodging and panic-eyed, was seen boarding a private jet in California bound directly for the United Kingdom, alone. No Harry, no kids, no staff, no press release. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Just silence. So what's going on? What exactly forced her to make this last-minute emergency trip? What was in the palace documents that leaked this morning? And perhaps more chillingly, who is Archie's real mother? Because if the whispers are true, and tonight they're growing louder by the second, then the future of the monarchy, the legitimacy of Archie's titles, and the entire Markle narrative might be standing on a house of cards ready to collapse. And when it does, no one will escape untouched. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. This isn't just about Meghan. This is about why now. Why did the palace choose this moment to act? Why is this woman, who once so fiercely protected her private life, suddenly caught in a storm of public reckoning? And why, after years of rumors, lawsuits, cryptic interviews, and royal tension, has the truth only now begun to surface? Let's start where the world left off. The last public sighting of Meghan Markle had been textbook calculated. Picture perfect. She was all smiles, dressed in muted cream tones with Archie in one hand and Lilibet's curls bouncing under the California sun. Paparazzi flashes timed perfectly. Royal watchers called it a subtle message to the firm. We're happy. We've moved on. But then, silence. Weeks passed with no social posts, no appearances, no Markle interviews. And then came the whisper. It began as a single tweet, deleted minutes later, by a former palace aide who'd once served during Meghan's early days at Frogmore Cottage. Just 10 words. She knows. She always knew. And now the world will too. That tweet sent online speculation into overdrive. And what followed? A chain of events that even seasoned royal insiders couldn't have predicted. A sealed court document, dated over 4 years ago, mysteriously surfaced in a legal database typically used for property disputes. Except this wasn't about land. It was about lineage. Titled in plain font, buried in bureaucratic language, the filing mentioned one startling phrase. Custodial oversight related to a minor with royal entitlement. And the name attached? Not Meghan, not Doria, not even a Markle, but someone completely unknown to the public. A name redacted in most places. A woman hidden behind layers of confidentiality. One who, by all appearances, had been erased until now. So who leaked the document? Why now? And how is this tied to Meghan's sudden dash back to the UK? Let's step back for a second. Remember the swirling controversy during Meghan's pregnancy with Archie? The oddly fluctuating bump sizes. The inconsistencies in due dates. The baffling body language footage of her squatting down too effortlessly at 6 months pregnant, without the hesitation or strain most pregnant women experience. And let's not forget that viral moment when her baby bump appeared to shift in a way that many thought defied biology. Dismissed as tabloid sensationalism at the time, these moments were ridiculed by Meghan's supporters and chalked up to unfair scrutiny. But now those clips have resurfaced. And this time, they're being viewed under a far more suspicious lens. Because suddenly, people aren't just asking if Meghan used a surrogate. They're asking if she even had legal claim to the child at all. And here's where things get even more bizarre. Palace insiders, who for years maintained a strict, no-comment policy regarding royal children, have suddenly gone quiet, but not out of loyalty. This time, it feels like they've been muzzled. Because someone higher up authorized the release of that legal document. Someone powerful. Someone who wanted this out. So now, a nation, no, a world, is watching as the palace scrambles to control the narrative while Meghan sprints across the Atlantic with everything to lose. What will she say when she lands? Will she try to spin the story before the truth spreads? Or was this always part of a larger game? And where is Prince Harry in all of this? He's been conspicuously absent. Some say he's in Germany attending charity functions. Others claim he's gone off-grid and is unreachable, even by Meghan. Is he avoiding the press? Or is he avoiding something much bigger, like the fact that he might not even be Archie's biological father? Yes, that's another layer. Because when court documents begin to surface regarding custodial rights, surrogacy contracts, and medical records, all with names missing, timelines blurred, and gag orders mysteriously lifted, you can't help but wonder, what's being covered up? And by whom? See, Meghan's brand has always revolved around control, of image, of narrative, of perception. But this is the one thing she can't spin. Because if it turns out Archie was born via a surrogate, and that surrogate is now coming forward to claim her child, then the repercussions could be historic. Royal lineage would be questioned. Title claims would be invalidated. And most crucially, public trust in the monarchy and in Meghan herself would shatter. Which brings us back to the airport. According to flight logs, Meghan's jet took off just hours after palace officials were seen entering a closed-door meeting at Windsor. Coincidence? Unlikely. One source reports that Meghan was notified about the document leak 30 minutes before takeoff. And when she heard which name had surfaced in the unsealed record, she turned pale, dropped her phone, and whispered just one word. No. So, who is this woman? And what exactly does she want now? Some say she's seeking nothing. Just the truth. Others claim she was paid to disappear years ago, and now the deal has expired. But the most chilling theory? That she never agreed to anything. That the entire narrative, Meghan's pregnancy, the staged baby shower, the stylized maternity photos, was built atop a secret too devastating to reveal. Until now. And yet, here we are. 3 minutes ago, Meghan Markle stepped onto British soil once again. No press conference. No Instagram post. Just a woman with a secret, returning to the one place that could destroy her or save her, depending on what comes next. And what comes next will change everything. Because as we begin to unravel the story behind Archie's true origins, behind Meghan's frantic movements, and behind the palace's cryptic silence, we're going to expose not just a cover-up, but a collision of love versus legacy, of truth versus power, of a mother's claim versus another woman's reality. But before we name names, before we connect the legal threads, before we examine the mysterious woman known only by 2 initials in redacted files, we need to go back to the very moment Meghan boarded that plane. Because in her hand wasn't just a phone, or a clutch bag, or a passport. It was something far more dangerous. A letter, signed, stamped, and addressed to the one person who still holds power over her fate, King Charles III. But what's inside that letter will blow this story wide open. And no one saw it coming. What was in the letter? What would make Meghan Markle, who has spent the last few years meticulously building her brand, her empire, and her version of events, suddenly abandon Montecito, ditch security, and jet off across the Atlantic alone? What message could have forced her hand so swiftly that she didn't even bring her children? This wasn't a scheduled trip. This wasn't about charity. This wasn't a working royal engagement. This was survival. But let's rewind. Not to the moment Meghan landed, but to the moment she ran. It was just past 9:47 p.m. in California. Meghan had been seen earlier that afternoon at a quiet organic cafe, smiling with staff, wearing a flowy, brandless linen blouse. Very intentional, very off-duty. The paparazzi shots felt too perfect, almost planted. Yet just 3 hours later, she was gone. Flight logs confirm. A Gulfstream G550 took off from a private Santa Barbara airstrip just after midnight. Destination: RAF Nordholt, a discreet military airbase in West London used for quiet, urgent arrivals. On board, 1 woman, 1 personal assistant, 1 letter, and silence. Not even Harry. That's what made this so shocking. Because if you know anything about the Sussex's strategy, you know they do everything together. Especially when it involves the palace. So where was Harry? Why wasn't he at her side? Was he not invited? Or had he chosen to stay behind? And what did Meghan know that made her leave everything behind? Here's where things start to unravel. Multiple sources close to the palace confirmed that earlier that day, mere hours before Meghan's sudden departure, King Charles was given a sealed report from his private legal counsel. This wasn't a public document. It wasn't leaked to tabloids or shared with aides. This was internal, royal eyes only. Inside that report, a disturbing legal development. New evidence regarding Archie's parentage reportedly surfaced through a reopened custody petition filed in a sealed UK court. One name was included in those documents that sent chills down Charles's spine. Not because he recognized it, but because he didn't. The woman named was not Meghan. She wasn't a royal. She wasn't even British. But the medical records were real. The contract signatures had been verified, and the timelines matched perfectly with Archie's due date. This wasn't a theory anymore. This was proof. Which brings us back to Meghan's flight. How did she find out so fast? Some say Harry tipped her off. Others claim someone inside Clarence's house, a secret ally, perhaps, called her directly. But what we do know is that Meghan didn't wait to confirm the details. She acted immediately. Her private jet was fueled within 40 minutes. No staff photographers. No leaks to TMZ. No carefully curated Instagram story. Just Meghan, clutching a thick envelope with trembling hands. One staffer at the Santa Barbara airfield claimed she looked hollow, like the air had been sucked out of her. She wore no makeup. No signature coat draped over her shoulders. No jewelry except a thin gold bracelet, believed to be a gift from Diana's collection. Her only request? No photos. No questions. When asked if the prince would be joining her, her eyes reportedly flared for just a second before she muttered, "He's staying with the kids." The kids. Plural. Yet she only seemed concerned about one. Archie. Why? What did she know about the documents the palace had received? What had she read in that letter before sealing it with her own initials? Let's talk about that letter. Because, according to palace insiders, Meghan didn't just write to King Charles to explain. She wrote to warn. The letter wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea. It was a threat cloaked in sentiment. Insiders claim it contained the following key points. A preemptive denial of all allegations regarding surrogacy. A declaration that any claims about Archie's biological origins were defamatory and racially motivated. A veiled threat that if this narrative continued, global legal action and public exposure of internal royal secrets would follow. Classic Meghan. Control the narrative, flip the blame, raise the stakes. But the letter didn't work. Because by the time she landed in the UK, it was already too late. Now, here's the part that hasn't been reported yet. At the exact moment Meghan's jet touched down at RAF Nordholt, 3:11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, a separate plane landed at London City Airport. On board, the woman. The one listed in the redacted court documents. The woman allegedly named in the surrogacy arrangement years ago. The woman now stepping forward after half a decade of silence. Let that sink in. Because Meghan wasn't the only one who had been summoned. She wasn't the only one flying into a storm. She was walking into a collision. Now imagine this. Meghan steps off the plane, escorted by an anonymous government vehicle. Not a palace car, not royal security, but a black SUV with tinted windows. She's taken not to Kensington or Clarence's house, but to a private legal facility in central London. No smiles. No wave to the public. No press. Inside that room, legal counsel, royal advisors, and a sealed file sitting atop a polished table. Across from her, a chair, empty, waiting, because the woman was on her way too. And what Meghan didn't know, what would shake her to the core, was that the woman hadn't come alone. She had brought evidence. Not rumors. Not stories. Proof. Let's pause here. Because you're probably wondering, why now? Why would the palace risk everything? Risk another media war with Meghan, risk accusations of racism, colonialism, misogyny. To finally bring this to light? Well, here's what changed. The crown is vulnerable. With Charles's health under scrutiny and the line of succession facing immense public pressure, legitimacy matters more than ever. Every detail, every title, every bloodline. And if Archie, beloved though he may be, isn't legally the son of Meghan Markle, or even, possibly, Prince Harry, then the monarchy has a constitutional problem on its hands. Because titles passed to the next generation require documentation, verification, bloodline. And for years, the palace had trusted Meghan's word. Until now. What happened in that legal meeting remains sealed for the moment. But multiple sources confirm that Meghan left visibly shaken. One witness claimed she was white-knuckled, lips pressed into a line, barely holding it together. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't make a statement. But she did go somewhere else that afternoon. And this is where the story takes an even darker turn. She went to a hotel in Mayfair. Alone. She checked in under a pseudonym. Staff were told not to disturb her. And then, nothing. No contact with Harry. No sightings. Just silence. Until late that night, when a man was seen entering through a side door. He wore a baseball cap, sunglasses, and carried a small leather folder under one arm. He was only there for 19 minutes. When he left, Meghan was crying. So, who was the man? Some say a royal advisor. Others say it was Harry. But the real twist? Security footage shows he left behind the folder. And in that folder, allegedly, DNA results. From a test taken without Meghan's knowledge. Conducted independently. Verified through a third-party lab in Switzerland. And the results? Would change everything. But what came next would shake the monarchy even harder, and no one saw it coming. What if the most explosive secret of the modern monarchy was never meant to come out? What if the truth about Archie's real mother had been buried so deep, so deliberately, that even senior royals weren't supposed to know? And what if someone, inside the palace walls, made a choice to detonate that truth? Not for fame, not for revenge, but to force a reckoning. Because make no mistake, this leak wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a file left in a copier. It was a message, and it came from someone with access, with motive, and with a plan. Let's go back to the moment it all started to unravel. 3 weeks before Meghan's midnight flight, something strange happened. An anonymous account on X, formerly Twitter, posted a cryptic message at 2:07 a.m. London time. What's buried beneath Windsor will finally surface. #JL #Windsor whistleblower. No one knew what to make of it. At first, royal gossip pages brushed it off. Conspiracy channels latched on. But inside the palace? Panic. Because Windsor whistleblower wasn't just a username. It was a signal. A digital fingerprint used by a single person who, years earlier, had leaked details about Prince Andrew's infamous BBC interview weeks before it aired. This wasn't your average troll. This was someone real. Someone dangerous. Someone close. So who exactly is the Windsor whistleblower? We don't have a name. Yet. But here's what we do know. The username was first flagged internally back in 2019, during the height of Meghan and Harry's feud with senior royals. The account posted encrypted clues, dropped vague references to internal meetings, and once tweeted out the precise time Queen Elizabeth would exit her private train, down to the second. This was no outsider. They knew royal travel routes, private security shifts, and briefing room codes. A mole. But not just any mole. This one had a conscience. Because this time, the Windsor whistleblower wasn't hinting at scandal. They were shouting a truth, one that had been hidden since Archie's birth. Let's rewind the timeline. When Meghan gave birth in 2019, everything was tightly choreographed. There were no hospital photos, no balcony appearance, no paparazzi outside the Lindo wing. Instead, there was a sudden announcement hours after the supposed birth, followed by a 2-day delay before anyone saw Archie in public. Even then, he was swaddled tight. No full-face photos. Royal fans thought it odd. Royal staff thought it suspicious. And at least one person, let's call them the insider, started taking notes. Because according to internal communication logs recently obtained by a UK journalist under FOIA request, there were at least 2 birth announcements drafted for Archie in the weeks leading up to May 6, 2019. 2 different due dates. 2 different locations. One marked Wellington Wing at the Portland Hospital. The other marked Surrogacy Agreement, Supplemental Notice. That second file had been deleted. Or so they thought. But someone kept a copy, and that someone just leaked it. The leak wasn't loud. It was surgical. A single USB drive was mailed anonymously to a freelance researcher working on a book about royal genealogy. Inside, a collection of legal drafts, scanned letters, medical facility contracts, and, most shockingly, redacted sections of a sealed court case labeled, in the interest of minor A. M.H.M.W. A. M. H.M.W. Archie Mountbatten Windsor. But there was one more document. A heavily watermarked, time-stamped hospital discharge form. And the mother's name? Not Meghan Markle, but a woman with the initials JL. Who is JL? So far, her identity remains protected. but sources claim she was a U.S. citizen, hired through an elite medical coordination agency specializing in high-profile surrogacy arrangements. According to leaked fragments, she was healthy, mid-30s, discreet, and reportedly compensated generously, with a contract that included a lifetime gag order. She vanished from public records around mid-2019. Until now, because she is the second party listed in the unsealed case that landed on King Charles's desk the day before Meghan's frantic flight. And the Windsor whistleblower? They made sure it landed there. Why? Why now? Why would someone risk everything, job, security clearance, even prosecution, to let this truth out? Motives are swirling. Some say it was revenge. The whistleblower had been demoted during Charles's succession reshuffle. Others whisper guilt. They knew from the beginning, and the weight of silence became too much. And then there's the most chilling theory, that this person isn't acting alone, that this is part of a slow, deliberate takedown. Not just of Meghan, but of everything she's built. A reputational collapse from the inside out. A surgical unraveling. And it started with the leak. Here's where things get even murkier. The palace, upon receiving the leaked file, didn't go into crisis mode publicly. They didn't issue a denial. They didn't launch an investigation. They went silent. Internally, however, all hell broke loose. Staff were called into emergency meetings. Devices were confiscated. Senior aides were revetted. And one particular office inside Clarence House, the one responsible for archiving royal legal correspondences, was locked down entirely. Because the leak hadn't just revealed that Meghan might not be the biological mother. It had exposed the possibility that Harry didn't know the full truth either. That somewhere, behind palace doors, someone had manipulated the facts even from him. Let that sink in. What if Harry was kept in the dark? What if, in the midst of his rebellion against the royal machine, he didn't realize that he was being managed too, controlled, handled? And what if this leak wasn't meant to harm him, but to warn him, to show him that he's been a pawn in someone else's game? Because here's what happened next. After the documents were received and Meghan was already en route, King Charles summoned a closed-door council. Not press advisors, not spin doctors, lawyers. And their verdict? That the documents were credible, authentic, and too dangerous to keep hidden. Which meant one thing. They had to confront Meghan, face to face. But here's the twist. Before that confrontation could happen, someone, possibly the same whistleblower, leaked another file. This time, directly to a European media outlet, a Danish journalist. Unknown, small following, but known in insider circles for breaking royalty-related stories ahead of major press. They posted a single image. A redacted form with one phrase visible. Custodial claim, JL versus MM. That's when everything exploded. Because suddenly, this wasn't just speculation. It wasn't just conspiracy. It was legal, and it was international. In Montecito, panic. Within hours of the image going viral, Meghan had deleted her private Telegram channel. Staff at Archwell were told not to speak to the press. Publicists scrambled. Then, the jet. Then, the letter. Then, the silence. Because Meghan knows what this means. If the story is proven true, not only could her claim as Archie's mother be questioned, but her entire narrative about race, about motherhood, about oppression, about escape, could come crashing down. It would be the ultimate undoing, which is why someone wanted it out. Not for gossip, but for justice. And here's one final twist for this chapter. The Windsor whistleblower, after the leaks, after the chaos, after the international storm they unleashed, posted one more message. Then they vanished. The message? Truth isn't betrayal. Silence is. But what they didn't reveal, what even Meghan doesn't know yet, is that the final piece of evidence is audio. And it was captured in a place Meghan thought was safe. But what came next would break the internet, and the palace was powerless to stop it. What if the biggest lie wasn't in what Meghan said, but in what she never said? Let's strip it all back for a second. No royal titles. No Netflix documentaries. No Oprah interviews. Just one question. Did Meghan Markle ever carry Archie? Because while the palace may have danced around the question for years, while fans argued online and critics were dismissed as conspiracists, what's emerging now isn't just a theory. It's a collision between two timelines, two medical stories, and two very different versions of how Archie came into this world. And right at the center? A a story Meghan told on global television. About fertility struggles, IVF heartbreak, and the miracle of pregnancy. But is that story real? Or was it always the beautiful lie? Let's start with what Meghan has publicly claimed. In her 2021 interview with Oprah, she made a quiet reference to having trouble conceiving and how it was a blessing when we finally had Archie. She never used the word IVF directly, but the implication was clear. Fans took it to mean Meghan had gone through the same journey so many women do. Hormone shots, failed embryo transfers, emotional exhaustion. It humanized her. It made her relatable. And it painted the palace, once again, as cold and unsupportive of her motherhood journey. But here's the problem. Meghan never actually showed proof of pregnancy. And now, years later, the inconsistencies in her story are starting to crack under pressure. Let's examine the visuals. From the beginning, Meghan's baby bump was a point of public fascination and confusion. There were photos where the bump appeared significantly smaller one day and much larger the next. There were videos where her bump collapsed slightly as she crouched down to greet children, behavior most pregnant women at 6 months avoid. Even major outlets like Daily Mail and The Sun ran side-by-side comparisons of her bump changing shape within 48 hours. And when asked to explain, Meghan's team gave a curt response. Speculation about a woman's body is invasive and unacceptable. The press backed off, but the footage never disappeared. And now, it's resurfacing, analyzed, pixel by pixel, frame by frame. And it's raising a chilling possibility that there was no pregnancy, that there was no IVF, that the bump was prosthetic. Now let's talk science. Several medical experts interviewed under anonymity by European outlets have weighed in on Meghan's alleged pregnancy. One OBGYN who reviewed Meghan's public appearances, without diagnosing, but observing body mechanics, said something telling. Her gait didn't change. Her center of gravity stayed constant. That's highly unusual for a woman in the 3rd trimester. Another noted the absence of common pregnancy markers, swelling in the hands, facial bloating, changes in posture. Of course, not every pregnancy looks the same, but the pattern here is what matters. Because even Meghan's team released conflicting statements about her delivery. At one point, they claimed Archie was born at home. Later, it was confirmed he was born at the Portland Hospital in London. Why the confusion? Why the contradiction? Unless there was something to hide. Here's where things get even murkier. An internal document, part of the leaked cache obtained by the Windsor whistleblower, contains a communication between Meghan's legal team and a private surrogacy firm. Dated November 2018, just months before Archie's birth, the document outlines exploratory discussions around gestational carrier options, including legal implications tied to dual UK/US citizenship for resulting offspring. Let's translate that. Meghan's team was actively exploring surrogacy options, while publicly projecting an image of a glowing royal mom-to-be. Was it a backup plan? Or was it the only plan? Because soon after that document was filed, Meghan was seen with a bump. Yet there's no record, none, of her receiving prenatal care at any of London's major maternity clinics. And here's where the story turns from suspicious to strategic. Multiple insiders from the Portland Hospital, where Archie was allegedly born, claim Meghan's entire birthing plan was shrouded in secrecy. Unlike Kate Middleton, who smiled from the Lindo wing steps just hours after delivery, Meghan's team didn't allow anyone access. No press, no hallway staff, no nurses other than those pre-cleared under NDA. One midwife, who no longer works at the facility, told a Spanish outlet, "We were told not to speak to her, not to look at her, and that she would only arrive after the procedure." It didn't feel like a normal birth. It felt like a production, a procedure, not a delivery. Which raises a sinister question. Was Meghan ever in that hospital for anything more than a photo opportunity? And if not, who was? Who was in the room? And whose baby was Archie, really? Now, about that woman. JL, the name redacted in all documents. The woman Meghan reportedly flew to meet behind closed doors. According to one of the legal aides now cooperating with the palace, JL was approached in 2018 after passing strict health screenings and undergoing full background checks. Her identity was to be sealed forever. Her role? To carry a child conceived via IVF using a donor egg and sperm source, both unnamed. But things changed mid-pregnancy, because somewhere along the line, the donor egg wasn't Meghan's. And that fact, according to one insider, is what triggered the panic inside the palace. Because if Meghan isn't the egg donor, and she isn't the gestational carrier, then what is her legal relationship to Archie? That's not just a personal question. That's a constitutional one. And here's where Meghan's story begins to crack apart. In every interview, every quote, every anecdote, she's been careful, very careful, to imply maternal connection without ever confirming biological fact. She says things like, "When I became a mother, the journey to motherhood, my child, my choice." But never, "When I was pregnant with Archie, when I gave birth." The closest she gets is, "When Archie arrived." Ambiguous, open-ended. By design, it sure looks that way. Especially now that private memos from Archwell's PR team have surfaced, revealing a strategy to highlight maternal imagery without inviting medical scrutiny. Translation: project the image, avoid the facts, control the optics, and suppress the truth. So where does that leave us? Let's take stock. Meghan claimed she struggled to conceive, but offered no medical documentation. She appeared pregnant, but showed signs inconsistent with third trimester physiology. She delivered in secret, under unusually tight security, with conflicting records. And now, there's hard evidence she engaged with a surrogacy firm under legal contract. What's left to believe? And more importantly, what's left to hide? Because this story isn't just about one woman. It's about the image of a modern royal mother, a feminist icon, a biracial trailblazer, and how that image was carefully sculpted, not just by PR agencies and Netflix producers, but by omitting a single, damning truth. That Meghan Markle may have never been pregnant at all. And now, the real mother? She's back, not to reclaim the spotlight, not to cash in, but to reclaim something far more powerful. Something Meghan never expected to be challenged. Maternity. But the next chapter in this unraveling tale? It isn't about Meghan. It's about the woman behind the initials JL. The one who vanished in 2019. The one whose DNA holds the key to everything. And what she's about to reveal will rip open a secret the palace has buried for years, and no one will be able to contain it. You've heard the whispers. You've seen the headlines. You've watched the bump. But now, after years of questions, contradictions, and calculated silence, the truth has finally been pulled from the shadows. Because the sealed court filings have been unsealed, and the name buried beneath layers of redaction, hidden under legal pseudonyms and protected by royal gag orders, is out. No more initials. No more code names. The real woman behind Archie's birth has stepped into the light. Her name? Juliana Lynn. American. 37. A former neonatal nurse turned high-end fertility surrogate. And now, the mother of the most controversial child in modern royal history. But wait, who is Juliana Lynn, really? And how did a woman from Colorado, living thousands of miles away from Kensington Palace, end up at the center of a royal scandal so explosive it could rewrite the House of Windsor's lineage? Let's unravel the timeline. Juliana's name first appeared in confidential documentation tied to a gestational agreement drawn up in December 2018. The agency listed on the contract? A discreet California-based surrogacy firm known for working with ultra-high-net-worth individuals, celebrities, and international royalty. Her role? To carry a child on behalf of two unnamed intended parents. Those parents, while not listed directly, were later confirmed through legal corroboration to be Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But here's where things got murky. Because Meghan, through both media appearances and official palace statements, never acknowledged Juliana's existence. She never mentioned surrogacy. She never offered transparency. And now, that silence has come back to haunt her. Let's go back to the document that started it all. Filed under Commonwealth Family Court Docket 22, CHR 914, the unsealed records contain a gestational carrier contract signed by Juliana Lynn, non-disclosure clauses, and a media blackout provision with severe financial penalties. Legal waivers confirming the carrier relinquished maternal custody, but not biological acknowledgement. A medical file showing embryo implantation conducted at a private fertility center in Beverly Hills. But what's missing is what set off alarm bells. Because nowhere in the file is there a signed egg donation form from Meghan. Which raises the question, was Meghan ever biologically connected to Archie? According to one key piece of evidence, the fertilization summary, the donor was anonymous. But in a handwritten note scribbled in the margins of that file, someone, allegedly Juliana herself, wrote, "Not Meghan's egg. Carrier contract only. No further questions allowed per NDA." Read that again. Not Meghan's egg. That changes everything. Because without a biological tie, Meghan is not Archie's genetic mother. She may have raised him. She may have named him. But in the eyes of biology, she's a legal guardian, not a parent. Now let's talk about Juliana. Why come forward now? Why break a multi-million-dollar NDA and risk legal fire from the Sussex empire? The answer, as it turns out, isn't money. It's justice. Juliana claims she had no intention of going public. In fact, she lived in silence for nearly 5 years, raising her own children in a quiet Denver suburb and trying to put the experience behind her. But when she saw the leaked legal filings in European media, when her initials, JL, started trending, she knew the walls were closing in. So she acted first. Through her lawyer, she filed a motion with a family court requesting limited disclosure, citing false public representations regarding biological lineage and a breach of original agreement terms through international media manipulation. In plain English, she accused Meghan of lying to the world, and lying to her. In a sworn deposition filed just days ago, Juliana dropped bombshell after bombshell. Here are the key highlights. Meghan's team reportedly told her the baby would be kept private for legal and image reasons, but that Meghan would never claim biological motherhood publicly. Juliana was paid $360,000 for the surrogacy, not including bonuses tied to silence. She was never allowed to see or hold Archie after birth. She claims Meghan insisted that no hospital staff see her or know about her presence. She was told she could never speak of the pregnancy, not even to family. And yet, for years, she kept quiet, until the lies started snowballing. Until Archie appeared in royal documentaries, in staged paparazzi shots, in interviews describing Meghan's pregnancy glow. And that's when Juliana says she felt sick, because it wasn't the agreement she signed. It wasn't the truth she'd been promised. And worst of all, it wasn't fair to the child. So what does this mean now? The British courts are reviewing Juliana's filings. Legal experts say this could trigger an unprecedented review of Archie's titles, citizenship status, and royal entitlements. Because if Meghan was not the egg donor, and if Juliana was the gestational carrier, then legally, who is Archie's mother? In the United States, surrogacy law varies by state. In California, gestational surrogacy is legal. And intended parents are typically recognized as the child's legal guardians, regardless of DNA. But in the UK, the rules are stricter. In British law, the woman who gives birth is the legal mother until a parental order is granted by the courts. Did Meghan and Harry file one? No record has been found, which means, at the time of Archie's birth, Juliana Lynn was his legal mother. And the palace knew. They knew, but they said nothing. Why? Because acknowledging it would have created a constitutional nightmare. Archie's position in the line of succession, his HRH eligibility, and his entitlement to titles are all contingent on legal parentage. Not PR, not optics, not Oprah. So the palace went silent. And so did Juliana. Until now. And just like that, 5 years of silence has exploded into global chaos. Now here's where it gets even darker. According to a second court filing just released by Juliana's legal team, there's more. More documents, more communication, and most damningly, more evidence. Juliana claims she kept a journal during the pregnancy, notes, dates, letters from Meghan's team. She also retained email threads between her and the legal coordinator for the surrogacy agency. And one of those emails contains an audio file, a voicemail, from Meghan, left at 2:13 a.m., 1 month before Archie's birth. In the message, Meghan allegedly says, "I know we're asking a lot, and I'm sorry. But we need this to be invisible, completely invisible. You'll understand why someday." That recording is now being reviewed by international lawyers. And if authenticated, it could destroy Meghan's credibility permanently. So what does Juliana want? According to her lawyers, she's not seeking custody. She's not asking for money. She wants clarity. For herself. For the truth. For Archie. and for a world that's been manipulated by a myth crafted from curated images, staged bumps, and carefully chosen words. Juliana's final statement in her court declaration is both haunting and heartbreaking. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I was the one who carried him. I was the one in that delivery room. I was the one who cried when they took him from my arms. And the world deserves to know that. Where does this leave Meghan? In a hotel room in London. Alone. Knowing the palace now holds not just paperwork, but proof. Knowing that the real mother's voice is now public. Knowing that the question she's dodged for 5 years is now roaring back at full volume. And knowing that once Juliana's full story is released, once that voicemail is authenticated, everything Meghan built may crumble. Because coming up next, the one man who's remained silent, perhaps too silent, is about to be pulled into the center. And he may be the final puzzle piece. Because if Harry didn't know, or worse, if he did, then the next revelation will destroy more than Meghan's image. It will destroy their marriage. But what came next would flip the royal family upside down, and no one was ready for it. What if the only person who could have stopped this didn't? What if the one man who stood by Meghan through everything, from Megxit to Montecito, wasn't blindsided by the surrogacy secret, but was complicit in it? Because while the world is spinning from Juliana Lynn's revelation, and while Meghan rushes between lawyers, hotel rooms, and silent press offices, one question grows louder with every hour. Did Prince Harry know the truth about Archie's birth? And if so, why did he lie? Let's rewind. To understand how deep this goes, you have to go back to the earliest signs. When Harry began shifting from the cheeky spare of the royal family to a man seemingly determined to torch every bridge behind him. The press called it love. The palace called it recklessness. But behind the scenes, there were early signs Harry was walking a tightrope. And now, looking back through the lens of what we know about Juliana Lynn, the hidden surrogacy, and the voicemails, we can start to see the moves for what they were. Deliberate, strategic, and shockingly premeditated. Let's start with what he didn't say. During the Oprah interview, when asked about Archie's birth, Harry deferred repeatedly. Meghan spoke about feeling unsupported. Harry mostly nodded. When Oprah asked about how the institution responded to Meghan's pregnancy, Harry mentioned security, titles, race, but never once referenced the birth itself. He never said the words, "when Meghan gave birth." Not once. In fact, his most direct quote, "Becoming a father changed everything for me." Notice that. Becoming a father. Not watching my wife give birth. Not seeing our son come into the world. Just a vague emotional shift. Now, that might seem like splitting hairs, until you line it up with what we know now. Because it wasn't just careful wording. It was calculated omission. Sources close to the palace say there were early signs Harry was involved in the legal architecture surrounding the surrogacy. Internal emails from the Windsor whistleblower leak show communications between Harry's personal assistant and the legal coordinator at the California Surrogacy Agency. Subject line: royal privilege concerns, visibility, and titles. One email outlines a request from Harry's team to explore how surrogacy, via an American gestational carrier, might affect UK legal rights of inheritance and royal status. Translation: Harry wasn't just aware. He was planning. And he was worried. Worried about what would happen if anyone found out. Worried about how to protect a child who, technically, would not be born of royal blood. Because under British law, for a child to inherit titles and rights, lineage matters. And here's the kicker. No legal paperwork has ever surfaced confirming a parental order was filed in the UK courts for Archie's birth. If Harry knew that, and pushed ahead anyway, that's not just a scandal. That's a breach of protocol. And possibly a constitutional deception. Still think Harry didn't know? Let's look at one more moment. In 2020, during a virtual appearance at an event on fatherhood, Harry said something strange. "I didn't grow up knowing much about being a parent. So, I'm learning as I go. From the very beginning. From the moment we became responsible for this little soul. Became responsible for. Not conceived. Not welcomed into the world. Just became responsible. Once again. Clinical, detached language. Like someone describing a legal arrangement. And now we know why. Because according to new documents filed in Juliana's follow-up motion this week, Harry not only signed the surrogate contract, he insisted on the confidentiality clause. But here's the emotional gut punch. According to Juliana's sworn statement, Harry was in the delivery room, not Meghan. Harry. He reportedly arrived at the Portland hospital 24 minutes before birth. He entered a private suite. He held Archie first. Juliana claims he cried. She says he said, "Thank you for doing this. You've saved us. Saved us." Let that sink in, because that one sentence changes the entire narrative. This wasn't just a parenting choice. This wasn't just privacy. This was a rescue mission. So what exactly was Harry being saved from? Public scrutiny? Royal politics? Or the possibility that without surrogacy, he and Meghan could never have had a child at all? And now we reach the most tragic twist of all. Because if Harry knew, if Harry chose this, if Harry orchestrated a strategy of silence and manipulation, then why has he stayed silent now? Why not defend Meghan? Why not release a statement backing her claims? Why hasn't he stood beside her in London? Because insiders say Harry and Meghan are not in communication. According to a Montecito staffer who spoke anonymously, they've been operating separately since the leak. He's in Germany. He's not taking her calls. And when Meghan landed in London, Harry didn't show up. Not at the airport. Not at the hotel. Not at the legal meeting. So what does that tell us? Has he reached his breaking point? Or is he preparing his own exit? Royal aides say Harry has been in deep talks with Palace legal counsel, not to defend Meghan, but to renegotiate his children's status. If true, that would mean Harry is now trying to separate Archie's future from Meghan's past. A strategic move to protect his son's title, even if it means severing the narrative they built together. And yes, it's cold. It's brutal. But it's survival. Because if the monarchy declares Archie ineligible for succession due to the surrogacy not being filed under UK parental orders, then Harry could lose the one thing he left everything behind to protect, his family's future. And he knows it. There's also one more thing. A secret meeting, reportedly held just 1 week ago, at Balmoral. Harry flew in. No press. No announcement. He was seen walking the grounds with Prince William. Yes, William. The same brother he threw under the bus in Spare. The same brother whose rage, he claimed, left him shaking. Why meet now? Why talk privately? What could possibly bring these two back together after everything? One source says William confronted Harry with a simple, brutal question. Did you lie to all of us? And Harry didn't deny it. He just said, I did what I had to do. That answer, that hollow justification, was all William needed to hear. And apparently, he walked away, wordlessly, and hasn't spoken to Harry since. So here we are, a royal house divided, a brotherhood shattered, a marriage fractured, and a child, innocent, beloved, and unknowing, at the center of it all. The question no one wanted to ask now echoes through the palace corridors, through the streets of London, through the very soul of the monarchy. Did Harry help manufacture a royal child? Not raise, not love, not protect, manufacture. And if so, what else was manufactured? Their love story? Their narrative? Their escape from the crown? Because now, with Juliana Lynn on record, with legal filings mounting, with Meghan cornered, and Harry retreating, the final truth is closing in. And the next person forced to speak is someone the palace never wanted to hear from again, Queen Camilla. But what she reveals next will shake the foundation of the firm. And nobody is ready for what she's about to confess. What if this wasn't the first time? What if the story of Archie's mysterious birth wasn't a one-time secret? Because as the storm swirls around Meghan Markle, DNA results, court filings, missing hospital records, another layer of the truth is beginning to reveal itself. And it's one that even her most loyal supporters can't ignore anymore. It's not just that Meghan may have used a surrogate. It's that this may be part of a pattern. A carefully managed, historically consistent pattern of borrowing images, identities, and even wombs to build the life she always wanted. Because now, people are talking, and old stories from her past are re-emerging. Former friends, former assistants, even one very private Beverly Hills doctor. And what they're saying changes everything. Let's begin in Toronto. Long before the tiaras, the titles, and the global headlines, Meghan was living a quieter life on the set of Suits. To most, she was the hard-working actress, charming, ambitious, slightly mysterious. But within certain social circles, there was a whispered nickname that never made it to Instagram. The rehearsal mother. A reference, according to a former stylist on the show, to Meghan's habit of pretending to be something she wasn't before she actually was. She'd frequently talk about, "When I'm a mom someday," and "what kind of bump I'd carry," even in her late 20s, before she was in any stable relationship. Harmless dreaming, or early rehearsals for a role she never planned to physically play. Now, fast forward to 2015. Meghan was briefly linked to a high-powered Hollywood producer, known for his involvement in surrogate-born celebrity families. According to one of his former assistants, Meghan once asked him, point blank, how the process worked. She wanted to know everything. The laws, the timelines, how the press could be managed. She said, "I want the image of motherhood, but not the mess." Let that quote sit with you. The image of motherhood, but not the mess. It's a haunting line, and now, a prophetic one, because it aligns perfectly with the tactics she'd later use as Duchess of Sussex. Controlled imagery, staged bump photos, private birth, no medical staff, no messy reality, only the image. Another woman, this time a former yoga student of Doria Ragland, recalls overhearing Meghan at a retreat years ago talking about keeping the body tight for the cameras, even during pregnancy. It was said as a joke, but it landed awkwardly, especially now, because in the months before Archie's birth, Meghan continued a rigorous routine of walks, yoga, and full-blown stilettos well into her supposed third trimester. To some, it was empowering. To others, it was performative. But to those who were watching closely, it was inconsistent, unnatural, almost like a performance rehearsed years in advance. Now let's introduce the name Dr. K, a now-retired obstetrician in Beverly Hills who allegedly worked with Meghan before her royal romance. In a 2018 deposition unrelated to the royal family, his name surfaced in connection with a handful of elite clients, women who had signed non-disclosure fertility consultations for future family planning. One of the names mentioned, without confirmation, was Meghan Markle. His clinic specialized in egg preservation for career-focused women, coordinated IVF with anonymous donors, surrogacy matching for discreet, high-profile clients. Sound familiar? Because here's where it gets even more bizarre. Another former patient at that same clinic claimed she saw Meghan at 2 different appointments in 2016 and 2017. Once alone, once with a man described as older, wealthy, Caucasian, not hairy. The patient, who remains anonymous, recalls Meghan speaking to staff about backup plans and creating options. This wasn't about infertility. This was about choice. Controlling the narrative. Controlling the body. Controlling the story. And then there's the most chilling story of all. One told quietly for years by a former Soho House employee, Meghan's old stomping ground. According to this source, Meghan once introduced a young nanny to a group of guests during a private brunch as "my little one's future best friend." The odd part, she wasn't pregnant. She wasn't dating. She wasn't even engaged. Yet she acted as if a child was already part of her world. Why? Was it a fantasy? Or had plans already been set in motion, years before the palace, the press, or even Harry? Because if the surrogacy with Juliana Lynn wasn't a panic decision, then maybe it was always part of the master plan. But perhaps the most damning piece of Meghan's borrowed womb history comes from a private email chain dated January 2019. Leaked through the Windsor Whistleblowers dossier, it features correspondence between Meghan's legal team and a London-based fertility image consultant. Yes, that's a real title. In the emails, Meghan's rep asked for advice on optimal wardrobe to reflect second trimester authenticity, how to posture in public to project pregnancy glow, photographer recommendations for natural maternity shots. All this, despite there being no verified medical record of her ever being pregnant. Think about that. She was planning the pregnancy aesthetic without the pregnancy, and she was building it like a marketing campaign, carefully crafted, highly polished, zero unpredictability, all image, no intimacy, all control, no chaos. So here's the ugly question. Was Archie just the final act? Was Meghan's motherhood journey a storyline she controlled from beginning to end, right down to when the public could see him, how much they could know, and what version of the truth they were allowed to believe? Because as Juliana Lynn has now shown the world, Meghan wasn't the one in the hospital. She wasn't the one pushing through labor. She wasn't the one who screamed when Archie took his first breath. That was someone else. A woman erased from the story. A woman Meghan never acknowledged. Until now. And if this was her only experience with surrogacy, maybe she could explain it away. But with this many whispers from her past, this many shadows, this many patterns, can we still call it a coincidence? But the real kicker? There's reportedly another file. One that the palace hasn't released yet. One that allegedly contains a list of women Meghan consulted through private agencies in 2017. And one of the names on that list has just given an exclusive interview to a French magazine. In it, she claims, "She asked me if I would ever consider carrying a royal child. She said she couldn't risk her body for the crown." Let that sink in. She couldn't risk her body for the crown. And yet, she wore the tiaras, took the titles, cashed in the privilege, all while crafting the perfect image of the modern royal mother. Only, the motherhood was borrowed. The bump? A costume. The truth? A ticking time bomb. And now, it's detonating. The next 48 hours are expected to be critical. Sources say the palace may be forced to issue a statement, not just about Archie, but about protocol. Because if Meghan did, in fact, bypass the firm's internal vetting process for royal births, if she engaged in surrogacy without proper disclosure, if she constructed a pregnancy facade with full awareness of the monarchy's succession laws, then we're not just looking at a deception, we're looking at a betrayal of the firm, of the public, and of the child caught in the middle. But the palace is no longer the only one holding back secrets. Because next, Queen Camilla is ready to speak. And what she knows about Meghan's manipulation and how far it reached will stun even Meghan's most hardened defenders. What happens when a royal child isn't royal? What happens when the blood that runs through their veins isn't blue, but legally, contractually anonymous? This isn't just about scandal anymore. This isn't about Meghan, surrogacy, or even deception. This is about succession. Because if the allegations surrounding Archie's birth are true, if Meghan Markle neither donated an egg nor carried the child, then the monarchy faces a constitutional disaster unlike anything it has encountered in modern history. A child born through surrogacy, conceived using anonymous donors, and possibly without proper royal oversight. And now the question everyone is too afraid to ask must be spoken aloud. Is Prince Archie legally in the line of succession? And if not, what happens next? Let's start with the basics. The line of succession to the British throne is governed by the Succession to the Crown Act 2013, which modernized many rules but still relies on one unshakable principle: legitimacy. A royal heir must be born of lawful wedlock from a couple recognized by the Church and the Crown. But there's a second, less-known requirement buried deep in the royal protocol manuals: lineage. Not just legal, but biological connection to the sovereign bloodline. It's not enough to be raised in the family. To be considered an heir, you must descend from the line. This is why titles like Duke, Prince, and HRH are passed down so selectively. And this is where things get tricky. Because if Meghan Markle is not Archie's biological mother, and if Harry's own paternity, whispers of James Hewitt, is even remotely in question, then Archie's entire royal foundation may be invalid. Let's break this down legally. Under British law, when a child is born via surrogacy, the woman who gives birth is considered the legal mother until a parental order is granted. This order transfers parental rights to the intended parents. But here's the problem. There is no record, public or sealed, of a parental order ever being filed for Archie by Meghan or Harry in the UK courts. In fact, leaked internal notes from the palace's legal team reportedly state, no PO filed. No registered intention under UK family law. Assumed biological link declared. Assumed. That word is critical, because the palace never verified Meghan's pregnancy. They trusted her word. They accepted her photos, her bump.